Hey everyone, welcome to the TDC Radio show. It's Evan from TorontoDatingCoach.com, and I want to welcome you to this audio training session on inner game and confidence. In these training sessions, I'll be discussing various aspects of dating and relationships, and hopefully we'll be delivering some valuable content that you can use to take your interactions with women to the next level. Now, today I'm fortunate enough to have with me an amazing guest and someone that I've been familiar with for a couple of years now. I first started connecting with this guy in an online forum that we both are members of, and I've always been impressed and awestruck by the depth and thoughtfulness and direct nature of the advice he dispenses. He teaches both men and women about their emotional needs and how to address each other's emotional needs towards creating ongoing loving relationships. His teachings and philosophies are about relationship building, maintenance, and living in both traditional and alternative lifestyles. His book, Everything Out of Her Mouth is a Test, has been #1 on Lulu.com in the sex and relationships category since 2008. So who is he? He's Frank B. Kermit. And Frank, I want to thank you for taking the time to let me pick your brain a little bit today.
Evan, I'm really looking forward to this interview.
What I really focus on in my coaching is building inner game and confidence. And I wanted to talk to you about this because you have something that you teach called the emotional needs theory. And I want to talk about that a little later. But first, I wanted to know, from your perspective, how important is inner game in the context of getting better with women?
All right. In the way that I define inner game is the elimination of all of a person's hypocrisies. Finding beliefs inside a person that are in conflict. Mm-hmm. On the one hand, the guy is really attracted to a certain type of girl. At the same time, as much as he's attracted to her, he resents her. Because he resents something about her, maybe he thinks poorly of her, and these are hypocrisies that a guy has to resolve. It's the same syndrome of the guy saying, I really want to pick up the club hottie, but if she has sex with me, I'll hate her because she's a slut.
Right.
And these type of hypocrisies are a reflection of poor inner game. Mm-hmm. How important is it? Well, does a guy need perfect inner game to pick up a girl and have sex? The answer is no. He doesn't have to have perfect inner game. If he has other things going for him, if he's a good-looking guy, if he's got money, if he has other attributes that women will be attracted to him for, he doesn't have to have good inner game to get women. In fact, if he ends up with a dysfunctional woman, let's say an emotionally dysfunctional woman, and he's an emotionally dysfunctional man, they're going to have some form of relationship, and it may very well last a certain amount of time. Mm-hmm. The point of having good inner game when it comes to relationships is that if you want an emotionally healthy relationship that lasts the long term, that's where having solid inner game is absolutely necessary. Because those hypocrisies, like the example I gave you, those are the types of things that will, in the short term, maybe, you can get by them and you can actually have a relationship with a girl. But in the long term, those hypocrisies always come to the surface and ruin what you have.
All right. What do you think, what is it that you think is the cause of those hypocrisies, or like is kind of really the underlying thing that's going on there for a lot of guys?
The cause of hypocrisies, that could be anything from the way a person is raised, when their desires are in conflict with the way they've been brought up in terms of their morals, what their expectations are. A lot of it has to do with the person's upbringing and the ideas that they come up with in terms of the fantasy world that they create, believing this is how it's supposed to all be perfect. Mm-hmm. And then they get into the reality of it, and the reality doesn't match up to that fantasy. But we have been brought up to believe, at least I was brought up to believe in that ideal fantasy woman, fantasy relationship where everything is just perfect. Mm-hmm. And in real life, nothing is perfect, not relationships, not human beings. And sometimes you have to deal with a reality that is less than perfect. And when that happens, there's that resentment, that inner war going on. So when I sat down to go through my own personal development, that was one of my goals, and that is to eliminate my personal hypocrisies.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm going to desire the club hottie and then hate her for having sex with me because she's a slut, that's a hypocrisy. Now, I either have to appreciate her for being sexually liberal, or I shouldn't be going after her to begin with.
Right.
If she's representing something that I'm personally against. You can't have it both ways. In the short term, you might get away with getting sex, getting some attention, and getting a dysfunctional relationship. In the long term, it doesn't work. You end up alone, you could end up divorced, you could end up paying out a lot of money, you can lose half your stuff. It's not a long-term success story if you're constantly letting these hypocrisies take over.
Okay, so you mentioned sitting down and kind of just taking along, meditating on your own hypocrisies. And I'm wondering if in the course of that, that's when you kind of developed your emotional needs theory. Is that how that kind of came into fruition?
Well, that's a separate story, actually. When it came to my inner game, I started off by writing out what my goals were. What is it that I wanted? And then I had to ask myself, okay, every time I've achieved anything close to one of these goals, was I able to handle it or not?
Mm-hmm.
So that was for the inner game. When it came to the emotional needs theories, I reached a point where I got stood up at my prom, lost my ex-fiancée to my best friend, hung out with a girl for 2 years only to find out that she went ahead and married this other guy. And I just accepted the fact that I know nothing about women. So I'm starting from scratch.
Mm-hmm.
I read a bunch of books. I talked to a lot of guys who were very good with women, and I was looking for some sort of underlying theme, an idea that could apply to every situation. And how I came up with the emotional needs theory basically was trial and error. So I would have a mentor of mine, and he would say something like, "Protect a girl's reputation." Okay, go out, protect a girl's reputation, bring it up in conversation, demonstrate to a girl that I know that I could protect her reputation if anything happened to us. Let's see what happens.
Okay.
And it was through constant trial and error for a period of about 3 years, day in and day out, and especially for the first 5 months of that, where I didn't do anything except study and apply this knowledge. This meant no comic books, no newspapers, didn't listen to radio, didn't watch television. I had a full-time job at the time, so my lunch hours, after work, before work, all dedicated to study and trying this out. Weekends would come by, and I would either be watching videos about human interaction, a relationship, seduction, looking for some sort of underlying theme, or I would be talking to people, and it was all about, what could I practice right here? What could I observe in this interaction? Getting a girl to talk about something that she's totally fascinated about. What are the cues that I'm looking for? And it was a really difficult 3 years. It was trial and error. There was a lot more failure than success.
Right.
But when that first success finally happened, it was exponential about, the last 5 months of that 3-year period was very exponential because I went from having my first sexual experience in 5 years to having 5 lovers and girlfriends at the same time within that 5 months. Because everything that I was doing, the trial and error, once I got the result, I tried it again, got the result again, tried it again, got the result again, and it just built from there.
Right. So it really seems like understanding a woman's emotional needs just really adds that extra little bit of rocket fuel in creating success and having your relationships take off.
Well, for me, it's everything.
Mm-hmm.
Understanding emotional needs of women and men, and now applying it, because I'm a father now, applying the emotional needs ideas to children and being a father, it's the way I interpret the entire world now.
Right.
For me, it's everything. It's not something I just do with women now. It's the way I live my life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, it's really easy. It's really easy to see how understanding a woman's emotional needs can help a man better navigate through that romantic relationship. what I'm curious about is how do you think a man understanding his own emotional needs can help him develop stronger inner game, or can it, for that matter?
Yes, it can. In terms of the men's emotional needs, in order for him to understand his own emotional needs, he really needs to come to terms with what his boundaries are, what he will and will not accept, not only in a romantic relationship, but in any kind of relationship in his life, including his work relationships. Trying to come to terms with what your boundaries are and being willing to enforce your boundaries when they are violated. This is something that, if you don't know what your boundaries are, is going to be very difficult.
Right.
Most guys never really think about what it is they want. And those that do don't consider the next step of, well, can you handle what you say you want?
Right.
You know, let's use a common example here. Most guys say off the top of their heads, I would love a threesome. I'd love to be with two girls at the same time. Well, the truth is, not every guy can really handle being with two women at the same time. And I'm not talking about just the physical stamina of it. Can you really feel comfortable knowing that there's two people there who are both naked and now you feel the pressure to please? How are you going to handle it if the two girls decide that they want to touch and explore each other? Maybe the two girls will be putting more attention on one another and you're going to feel left out. Are you going to be comfortable in that situation? And a lot of guys aren't. You know, every guy says to his girlfriend, oh, I can't wait to, I want to see you kiss another girl. But as soon as that girlfriend says, okay, I'll try kissing another girl, and she does, some guys don't react very well to it. They feel threatened. And they don't anticipate any sort of possible negative reaction to it. So it's not just about knowing what you want. It's about honestly assessing, can you handle what it is that you say you want?
Right. So what's the reaction from most guys when one of these emotional needs are violated?
Because most guys don't really know how to articulate their emotional need, they'll feel violated. They'll feel a tinge. And the only thing they'll be able to say is, I don't know why, but I feel there's something wrong.
What's really interesting to me about that is how do you, as a guy, feeling that one of your emotional needs is violated. Like I'll take an example from my own life where if I'm with my girlfriend and she's kind of being a little distant, and there's a part of me that kind of will almost question, like, well, is there something that I did, right? Is there a way to kind of step back and assess the situation from an emotional needs standpoint?
Well, in the way that I teach it, I've come up with the 10 categories of men's emotional needs. So whenever you get that feeling of, there's something wrong here, I can't put my finger on it, but I'm not happy with this situation, you would at least look at those 10 categories of emotional needs and figure out if any of them are being represented in what you're feeling in the moment. Now, what you did in your situation where, let's say, your girlfriend is being distant, your first thought is, did I do something wrong? Now, that's what most guys do, because we are problem solvers. And when a person is a problem solver, they take on the responsibility of the situation because it gives them the power in order to fix whatever problem may be created.
Right.
That's in other areas of our lives. That's a wonderful thing. When it comes to our relationships, though, at least in my own philosophy, when you know that you're addressing a woman's emotional needs and she's acting distant, now you know that it's nothing that you're doing wrong.
Right.
That's when it comes into question, I am feeling disrespected. And at the heart of a man's emotional needs is that underlying theory. When a man feels disrespected, that's when his emotional needs are being violated on some level.
Okay.
So I'll give you a quick example. A guy and a girl are dating, and one of the emotional needs of men is put us first, put our relationship ahead of anybody else.
Right.
And the girl listens to her friends, and then the girl comes in and says, I was talking to my friends, and they say that we have a bad relationship because, and then starts listing all the reasons why her friends think that your relationship with her isn't very good.
Right.
And the guy is saying, okay, this is just women talking, whatever. He's trying to blow it off. But on the inside, there's something not right about it, and he can't put his finger on it.
So in that example, what's an appropriate way for that guy to bring that up to his girlfriend, but not have her feel shamed in any way, like to do it in a respectful way? Or
there are times when it is necessary to confront someone when they're violating your emotional needs.
Okay.
In a case like that, now, should the guy start berating her? Should he call her names? Of course not. That's getting into the realm of being abusive.
Mm-hmm.
However, he does need to state a boundary, such as, I'm not interested in what anybody else has to say about what our relationship is and how good or not good it is. I'm only interested in hearing what you think. So prior to hearing any of this from your friends, did you have a problem with our relationship, or were you content with it?
Mm-hmm.
Which is it? Be honest.
Right. So it's really just it seems like it's about digging out her actual experience of your relationship, in a way.
Can you reword that question, because I'm not sure exactly what you're asking.
Well, in that example, it seems like the guy we're talking about here is asking his girlfriend what her actual experience of the relationship is, rather than her friend's experience of the relationship. And is that something that's important to do when you're bringing up these emotional needs, to get an authentic representation of the other person's actual experience?
In that particular context, yes, it is. Overall, no, it's not. Because what a person says and what a person does can be two different things.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I teach my students is you don't listen to what a person says, you listen to what a person does. So the person may be saying, I really have doubts about us being together long term, but that person is still seeing you 3 times a week.
Right, right.
Don't listen to what the person says, listen to what the person does.
Oh, got it.
So in those type of cases, asking somebody, what is your experience about our relationship, may not be the best way to go. Let me put it to you this way. I have a boundary. If what my interactions are with another person are of no consequence to anyone else, those other people's opinions do not matter.
Mm-hmm.
The same way that if I have a backyard and I decide to plant a garden in my backyard, as long as it's not doing anything that would make other people suffer, as long as I'm not planting something that will grow like a weed into other people's yards, as long as I plant a garden in my yard that stays in my yard, that doesn't affect any other person's household, then their opinions about what I'm doing in my space, in my world, is irrelevant. So when it comes to my relationship, if those other people suffer no consequence for the way I conduct myself in my relationship, they don't get a say.
Right. So it seems to me like better understanding your own emotional needs seems to create solid, healthy boundaries.
Exactly.
Right.
And healthy boundaries is an element of positive inner game.
Mm-hmm. Right. So one thing I want to ask you, are certain needs more important than others, or is there generally one particular need that is true for most people, most men, or is that something that depends on the person?
In my experience, I have always found that the 10 emotional need categories that I've come up with for men and women tend to apply to the majority of people. Mm-hmm. Which ones are most important to the individual, that's not something I can predict.
Okay, right.
There are some women who really value not being abandoned. So fear of abandonment is very important to them.
Right.
There are other women that fear of abandonment matters less, but things like their reputation matter more.
Right. Now, on that topic, one thing that really kind of struck me or stood out was that I can almost relate to some of the needs, the emotional needs of women, and so I was wondering if they're interchangeable to a degree, because it almost occurs to me like they're masculine and feminine needs, meaning that isn't it just as likely that a woman could want quiet time to recharge after a long day of work, and that a man could have an issue with abandonment?
No, this is such a great question. So I'm going to see if I can give you as complete an answer as possible. Can a man experience the emotional needs of women? Yes. What kind of an effect it'll have on him is very significant.
Mm-hmm.
For example, a lot of the guys that I tend to help in my client base, a lot of those men fear abandonment.
Right.
They have an emotional need of a woman. Unfortunately, those men who adopt the emotional needs of women turn out to be very unattractive to women.
Right.
When we talk about a woman adopting the emotional needs of men, for example, a career woman who needs her quiet time. When a woman adopts these emotional needs of men, I've often found that in some cases, they don't experience it the way a man experiences it. Woman wants to take, let's say, quiet time. For her, it's part of her emotional range, because she has a lot of busyness going on, she has a lot of drama going on, and then she wants her quiet time. That's where it seems to fall in. When a guy experiences quiet time for his emotional needs, it's because he needs that in order to find some level of emotional balance, to find some level of emotional health. This is where he deconstructs everything that's going on and tries to find some sense of the world and put some order to the chaos. So it has a very different effect. Those men who take on a lot of emotional needs of women tend to be very, very damaged and sometimes suicidal. And this is where I say, look, I got to refer you to a competent therapist here, because this has gone beyond my spectra. This is beyond my realm.
Right.
Part of what I teach these guys is to say, look, these are some of the emotional needs you have, and these emotional needs are reserved for women. When a man loves drama, the big joke is, oh, he must be gay. Well, no, because a homosexual man, yes, he would have the emotional need of drama, but for him, the drama helps him feel balanced and normal. When a heterosexual man experiences drama, it causes him to behave emotionally dysfunctional.
Got it. So I'm interested in knowing if a woman primarily has the emotional needs of a man and a man primarily has the emotional needs of a woman, is it even possible for them to have like a healthy relationship with each other?
Probably not. And I'm going to see if I can really explain this clearly. The only time that a man will have the emotional needs of a woman and still be emotionally healthy, where he's feeling emotionally balanced, is if he is a homosexual man. A heterosexual man who has the emotional needs of women will have a very dysfunctional emotional relationship with anybody he gets involved with. Now, when we're dealing with a woman who primarily has the emotional needs of men, if she has the emotional needs of men and feels a sense of balance, usually she's a lesbian.
Right.
However, if she is a heterosexual woman and she has a lot of the emotional needs of men, I've often found those women to be very angry and resentful. They're not. They don't seem to have that level of balance. They don't seem to have that peace of being emotionally healthy. At least this has been my experience in my client base.
Right. So
I am going back to school to get a license to become a therapist, because I want to explore my own work even further in this area.
Yeah. So I want to just take it back to the context of a guy approaching a girl in a coffee shop. He approaches her and he notices that some sort of emotional need comes up for her. Should that be addressed as soon as it comes up? How do you even address it?
Okay, the how to address it. You can do it through verbal communication, storytelling, or taking a very specific action. In terms of which is more effective, that really depends on the girl. Some girls want the verbal emotional needs addressed. Well, let me rephrase that. Some women respond better when emotional needs are addressed verbally. They want to be told a story, and they want to be drawn into some sort of a connection. Other women don't want talk, they want action, and respond better to action.
Right.
So that depends on the girl. In terms of should you address the emotional need when it comes up, the answer is yes, because if you don't address the emotional need when it first comes up, she might ignore the situation temporarily, but that same emotional need is going to come up later on in your interactions with her.
All right.
So if you don't address it now, you're going to have to address it later, and if you sort of brushed it off or swept it under the carpet, when it comes back later, it'll be an even more severe test.
Mm-hmm. How do you avoid the risk of becoming her like a therapist for her in that moment instead of a lover?
The rule is that you never listen to her problems. You get to know her and find out what role she can play in your life.
Okay.
One of the things that I teach my students is that when you're meeting somebody new, it's not about trying to get them to like you. You have to figure out what role that other person can play in your life. And one of the first exercises I get guys to do is I get them to write down the categories of women in their life. Everything from the toxic girl that they have to stay away from, all the way to the wife category of a woman that they would want to marry and have children with. And every category in between, whether it's a one-night stand girl, a sex buddy, non-exclusive girlfriend, harem primary, all the way up to wife category.
Right.
Once you know what the criteria are for what you're seeking, that's what's going through your head when you're meeting somebody new. So rather than worry about, I got to get her to like me, I got to get her to feel attraction for me, I go in there trying to figure out, what role can this person play in my life? It will bring up the conversation topics. It'll bring up the questions. As we're talking, she'll say something. I'll spot an emotional need being presented. Got to figure out, I'll address it. Let's see where else we can go. I've just learned something more about her. So I'm going to use a very simple example here with you, and I'll need you to be honest with me, but if this is covering stuff that's too personal, you tell me and we'll drop it.
Okay, sure.
All right. So I'm going to start off with a topic about smoking cigarettes. Now, Evan, I got to ask you, do you smoke cigarettes?
No.
All right. So let's start off with the bottom of the ladder here. Would you have a one-night stand with a girl who smokes cigarettes?
Yes, I would.
Would you have a sex buddy, a girl who you just hook up with a number of times? You're friends, but you have sex in secret. But she smokes. Would you pursue it?
Yeah, that depends.
On what?
And if she's cool enough.
If she's cool enough, the smoking wouldn't stop you from having her as a sex friend.
Probably not. No. That's almost a tricky question. It's hard to say. I don't think so, though.
So wait, you don't think so? What?
I don't think I would stop at that point if I really liked the girl.
Okay, so if you really like the girl, her smoking wouldn't stop you from seeing her once a week as a sex friend.
Right.
Okay. Would you make her a non-exclusive girlfriend, the type of girl that, you would start seeing more seriously, more often, maybe even present her to your friends and family as your girlfriend, and she smokes? Would you make her a non-exclusive girlfriend?
Probably not. No,
okay.
Probably not.
Now, since we know that you wouldn't even make her a non-exclusive girlfriend, we can pretty well assume that she'd never earn her a place as the primary of your harem.
Right, yeah.
Because if she didn't make it to non-exclusive girlfriend, she's not going to make it to the next level, which would be harem primary.
Right.
And we already know that if she's not going to make it there, there's no way that she would ever make it into the wife category.
Right.
Okay, so on the topic of smoking, you already have an idea of what role this girl could play in your life.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So as you're getting to know the girl, if it turns out she smokes, in your head you're already thinking, the most that I could have with her is a sex buddy.
Right.
I could never have anything more with her than just her and I being a sex buddy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think it seems like a lot of it really comes down to values there, though.
Mm-hmm.
Like for me personally, it's kind of like I want a girl in my life that values her health. Right? So there's something about her smoking that kind of tells me that she doesn't really value her health that much.
Okay, now that's your interpretation of it.
Mm-hmm.
Let's be very clear here. That's your interpretation of it.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Okay, but as your interpretation, since it's the relationship you want to get into, that's why it's important to you. The reason you need to understand what your own values are is that understanding your own values is part of having inner game.
Right.
Knowing who you are, knowing what your values are. Sometimes I'll be coaching a guy, and he says, I'm madly in love with this girl. And I'll say, okay, let's figure out what it is about this girl you really like, and then what is it about this girl you really don't like. And when we go through this deconstruction of what's going on inside him, it turns out that the girl he's madly in love with is also somebody that, on paper at least, is someone that he could never even have a long-term relationship with.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because of her behaviors and that. That's when we say, okay, now we got to find out what's going on inside him that would make him attracted to the type of girl that he says repulses him. We're talking about his hypocrisies again.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah.
And did you see how it all comes down to the elimination?
Yeah, that's actually quite brilliant. I'm actually really blown away just by that little ladder you kind of took me up to. It actually had me see something about myself that was kind of like, interesting.
Now, what happens when a guy who, let's say you were in this situation, you meet a girl, she's great, she's fantastic, she's amazing in bed, she's wonderful, but she smokes.
Right.
So at that point you say, okay, well, you know what, for this one girl, I'll ignore my values.
Right, yeah.
Well, if the smoking thing is a value to you, and you're already ignoring your own values just to be with somebody, that's not a basis that you can make a long-term relationship work.
Right. So again, that seems comes back to that boundary thing.
Exactly. Now this is, you got to understand, this is the inner game process I went through.
Right.
I detail everything, all of the writing exercises, this whole process. I detail it all in my book, I'm a Man, That's My Job, The Philosophy of the Seducer.
Right. Where can men get that book, Frank, if they're interested?
You have to go to my website, franktalks.com.
Okay. So, how has learning these emotional needs benefited you in your own life? And can you think of an example where maybe even with a client that you had where he really had no idea of these boundaries that he had, and as soon as kind of he started learning about his own values and own boundaries, his success just really took off?
I've had clients who came to me not having any real understanding of what even to say to a girl, and within 3 months losing their virginities. I've had guys who, after about 1.5 to 2 years of studying my material and applying my emotional needs theories, they get out of the whole seduction community altogether.
Right.
Because they just figure, okay, I've learned everything I need to know. I found, and after dating a lot of different girls, they found the one girl that they say, I know for sure she's the one I want to build a life with, and then they move on to that. I've helped the guys find their future wives. In my case, after working on myself for 10 years, when I met my wife, we decided to get married after 26 hours together.
Wow.
And it's just because we both knew what it was we were looking for, and we knew exactly what type of questions to ask. We both had experience with past relationships that taught us a lot about how to screen people. One of the things that I teach is that even at your personal best, you're still only 50% of a relationship. The other 50% is making sure you choose the right person.
Right. Yeah.
So if my material would have any major bonus, it's that it doesn't only allow you to understand the opposite gender. It allows you to choose the right partner for yourself.
Right. So for just in case there are any women listening to this session as well, Frank, is there any resource that you have where they can get a look at their own emotional needs? And
for women, the first book I always recommend to them is my book, The Eye of the Seductress. Mm-hmm. That is on the emotional needs of men. First book that women should read, and it's the third book that men should read.
Okay.
And then when women want to learn about their own emotional needs, I direct them to Everything Out of Her Mouth is a Test and the Emotional Needs Analysis Workbook.
Right. And you do one-on-one coaching with men, and they can also find that through your website, franktalks.com?
I do one-on-one coaching with men, women, and couples.
And couples, okay. What services do you offer explicitly to couples? I'm interested in that.
In terms of couples, what I would do is that I would bring both people together. I would see them individually for a couple of sessions, try to figure out, okay, what are your goals? I don't tend to deal with couples together right away, because what I'm looking for is what are the individual goals and are they compatible as a couple? Mm-hmm. Then I bring the couple together. And for most couples that I work with, it's couples who are yet to be married, and they just want to make sure that they're making the right decisions in getting married and committing their lives to the right person.
Right.
There's a difference between just having cold feet and having simple doubts like, wow, are we really ready for this? And the doubts of, am I marrying the right person?
Right.
Because you could find the right person, but without the relationship skills in place, even though with the right person, it doesn't necessarily mean the relationship is going to work long term.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. If you could give one last piece of advice to guys that are just starting out learning to be better with women and in the seduction community, what would that be?
One piece of advice?
Yeah.
The seduction community is not a replacement for competent therapy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
After 10 plus years of working with guys in the community, some of these guys really don't have a problem with women per se. Mm-hmm. They have some inner demons that require competent therapy, and learning anything from a pickup line to how to manage a date to how to get sex and so on, that does not take away the deeper issues like I hate myself, I hate men in general, or you're being a self-hating man, being misogynistic, hating women for whatever reason, issues from your own childhood that you haven't properly resolved.
Right. So do you think that a lot of the guys that kind of get involved in the seduction community, they're seeking some sort of validation outside of themselves?
I think that when the seduction community went mainstream,
mm-hmm.
you had a lot more guys coming into the seduction community for the wrong reasons.
Right.
Whether it's to show off to other guys, whether because, oh, my friend is into it and, it's going to look cool. Some of them just need to really get a professional therapist and deal with whatever mm-hmm. demons that they have. Mm-hmm. Even the best seduction material out there cannot help a guy who basically feels that he's unlovable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It seems to me that recently, in recent years, as you said, since the seduction community has gone mainstream, it seems like the guys that are really attracted to the seduction community are the guys that really don't have a lot of inner game, and that they're lacking some knowledge about themselves almost fundamentally that they're searching for in the wrong places.
Well, you're dealing with guys who are also much younger. Mm-hmm. Okay, when we started the seduction community, the average age of the guy was between the age of 25 to 42. Most of us were finished with school, we had careers, we had a good sense of self. Basically, all the other areas of our lives were pretty well set, and the one area, which was our love lives, sucked.
Right.
That was the average community guy about 12 years ago. Now, the average age for the guys in the community are about 18. You got teenagers studying this stuff. They're not even old enough to go into the clubs to be practicing club game.
Right.
Trying to learn club game. Mm-hmm. You're dealing with young men who haven't found themselves, haven't figured out what they want to do in the rest of their lives, and they're being inundated with a lot of theory that, quite frankly, some of them just wouldn't have needed.
Right.
Some of these guys would have figured it out on their own. The seduction community going mainstream has robbed the world of an entire generation of naturals who would have figured it out on their own, but no, now they've been inundated with all this theory, being told, well, this is the way it is. No, it's one of the ways to do it, but not the only way.
Do you think it's possible to turn that around? Do you think there's a way to change the direction that the community is currently going, or do you think that there's a way to even create a different community of just being a more authentic community, a way for men to... Is it even possible to create a community of men who are figuring this out naturally on their own, and they're not being inundated with all this this psychobabble, for lack of a better word?
There's a few things that can be done. The first thing is that an order needs to be set up. And by an order, I mean an organization to hold all of the teachers and the coaches and whatnot to a certain standard of business practices and ethics. Mm-hmm. That would be one of the first things that needs to be established. Right. In other words, we would set up an order, and anybody who is a member of that order is obligated to follow certain ethical practices. Yeah. Like, don't talk about things that you're not trained about. Right. Don't, when charging for your services, you have to charge in accordance with your level of experience, and it has to be proven or documented. Level of education would have to be considered as well. That's the type of thing that would help turn this around if it was going to be turned around. Mm-hmm. The idea of guys learning about this naturally. There was a time when that was the only way to learn it. Basically, you went out, you tried, you failed, you tried again until you found something that worked. And not everybody is capable of that. Some people do need the training. I mean, I needed the training. Mm-hmm. I was a natural flirt, but I couldn't get anywhere with it. Mind you, I still every now and then got lucky, and I got myself a couple of girlfriends before I ever got into the community. I got myself a fiancé before I ever got into the community. Mm-hmm. So for that, I think at this point, any education on how to make relationships work is going to be a good education. It's the one area of our lives where we're almost just expected to know how to make things work. Yeah. Now, that was true at a time period when you had social norms dictating what you could and could not do. You would have small communities that would say, well, what are we supposed to do? Well, you're allowed to date in this certain way. You have to follow these social norms, these customs, these rules. Sometimes they were religious rules because religion may have had a stronger hold on various communities around the world. Mm-hmm. But the social norms dictated how you were supposed to behave in a marriage, how you were supposed to behave in a long-term relationship, how you were supposed to behave courting and dating when you were younger. We are in a time now where those social norms have been completely removed. So there are no rules. Right. You got to figure it out. You get to make your own rules. You have freedom. Right. One of the things I teach is that the power of choice without the skill to know what to do with it leads to a worse misery than being in a system where people are telling you what to do.
Wow. That's awesome. Well, I want to thank you again, Frank, for this, for taking the time to sit with me and talk about this stuff. And it's been fascinating. I've actually learned some stuff about myself that I didn't really consider looking at before. The whole little ladder thing that you kind of took me through with regards to my values. It's definitely a way to look at your own inner game and your own emotional needs and develop a stronger sense of who you are. So I just want to thank you for that. And if guys want to get in contact with you, they can reach you at your website?
Just send everybody to franktalks.com. FrankTalks.com.
Okay, I'll put a link up when I add that to my website.
Evan, this has been really great. It's been a lot of fun. I've enjoyed talking with you. And hopefully, if you continue doing this audio series and you need to come back, more than happy to be a guest again.
Thank you very much, Frank.
Take care.